Welcome to the Skoll World Forum on Social Entrepreneurship, live from Oxford, England. And I'll be talking this afternoon about the rise of the social entrepreneur in Latin America. And I'm really delighted to be having as my guest Daniel Buchbinder. Daniel, a very, very warm welcome.
My pleasure, Emily.
Thank you so much for coming. Now, you are founder and director of Alterna, a social innovation platform which is empowering change both in Central America and beyond. You're here at the Skoll World Forum as a senior fellow at Skoll, but in fact, you began your career as a marketing exec at L'Oreal. You then became a consultant across private and public sectors, in tourism, mining, in the consumer market, across Latin America and across Europe too. And in fact, as an entrepreneur, you even advised the Ministry of Economics in Guatemala to create a national policy of entrepreneurship. We must hear more about that. And now you're based in Guatemala, in the Guatemalan highlands, and one of the areas you've been very passionate about is clean energy, developing alternative energy in Guatemala, such that it's produced 100% locally and sold at price so that it's accessible to the local market. And now you're working in impact across a whole host of spaces. But I must ask you first about how you convince the Ministry of Economics in Guatemala, the Ministry of Economics, to create this national policy, because that must be a first.
Sure, I guess our participation in that was trying to position social enterprise as a key point for the national policy. So that was our main participation on that.
And how did you manage to convince them? Because at that time, when was this?
So this was around 6 years ago.
And how was the whole idea of social enterprise? How much is that embedded inside the country?
Yeah, actually, it wasn't at all. And actually, when it still happens. When we say social enterprise, people look at you kind of weirdly, especially in governments, in certain government sectors. But to be honest, when you're talking with the right people and with the right passion, the concept sells itself. So you don't need to convince anyone. The concept is so appealing that basically anyone will fall for it.
And how would you describe, what's your understanding of what a social enterprise is? What is a social entrepreneur?
Sure, well, at least for us in Alterna and for the type of work that we do, which is more a for-profit approach.
A for-profit?
A for-profit approach. We say that a social enterprise is as an enterprise that has a business model which has an impact model at the core.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when you say it's at the core, is it driven primarily by impact or primarily by profit or a combo of the two?
It can be both. So actually how we have been thinking and acting on that is that we see this as a continuum. We don't like binaries.
Okay.
And so we prefer to think as routes towards impact.
Routes.
Towards impact and towards change.
Mm-hmm. So what does that mean? Those are all very broad concepts. Can you give me an example of what it means in practice?
Sure. Actually, so the most important things for us is the purpose. So it's not that important what's the origin, where the enterprise is coming from. It can be let's say a traditional company that understands or that sees an opportunity or sees a challenge that can be embedded within their business model.
So it could be a straightforward corporation up for profit, but then for some reason, either because of a market opportunity or because somebody at the helm sees that they want to get involved in a certain impact, they then bolt on this impact, but then the impact becomes core for doing that part of the business.
Exactly.
Can we perhaps have a drawing here of your social entrepreneur? I'll perhaps begin a bit, and then we might make him more South American, and by talking through, we can understand a bit more about what he or she or they are really like, and what are the key features of the entrepreneur.
Sure.
So let's. So what do they need to have?
This person could be an Egyptian as well.
or a Guatemalan, maybe.
Guatemalan.
Yeah, maybe not. What do they need?
So I think they need to have a very nice and very clear alignment between what they have here and what they have here. So let's see how that works.
And their hearts. Okay, so clear alignment between heart and brain.
Exactly. So let's say that here.
Great.
They need to have a very clear, sharp focus. So kind of they can, yeah.
Oh dear, it's a bit wiggly. Not so good. You want it sharp. Sorry about that. Okay.
And wide as well. So.
And wide, yeah. Okay, wide. A wide focus. Okay. So both very, very sharp, but at the same time, a very broad perspective. So understanding the whole ecosystem.
Exactly.
Okay.
Then I would say kind of well, let's use the nose as kind of, a smelling opportunity. Having that kind of also sharp nose to smell the opportunity, to read, to smell between the lines, if I may.
Yeah, that's very good.
And let's say that the mouth is that, so they have to be able to articulate, to engage, to bring resources, people, attention to their objective, to their mission, to their passion.
You have to be able to convince others and work, in cohort and in community with people.
They have to be magnets for talent, for other supporters, for funders, for everything. Yeah.
And perhaps they also need some kind of style and creativity.
Exactly.
So let's give them a sort of stylish, creative hat and earrings.
Exactly.
Which is important. So, go on. Yeah, you're going to draw something else.
No, I think it's a very good combo.
Okay. That sounds good. And what about anything that makes your social entrepreneur particularly Guatemalan?
So I think it has to do with having a big heart and having that possibility to connect it with a brainy aspect of it, and something that we found that is unique about Guatemalans, and because of this heritage of a Mayan culture in many cases, or because of diversity and just like a mix of what has happened in some occasions, it's creativity.
Creativity.
Exactly.
Okay, so we like that. So maybe
we can highlight.
Yeah, go on. That's the creativity. Yeah, and some good fun colours and doing things in a non-straightforward way. Yeah. Oh my word, that sounds cool. Yeah, quite circular. We don't only want straight lines.
Exactly.
We want
no straight lines. Absolutely.
No straight lines.
No linear.
No
thinking.
linear way.
Yeah,
so all sorts of creative. Yeah. So suddenly, yeah.
And with style.
And with style, and then maybe we could even kind of draw outside the box. We could start drawing. No, I don't want to.
We'll do that.
We're just in the imagination drawing all over this beautiful wooden Oxford table. Marvellous, antique. Okay, that sounds fantastic. That looks really, really great. I like all that creativity there. And so tell me a bit more about Alterna and how it works.
So Alterna is a platform that works with entrepreneurs in rural areas. So we have a program, and we actually, a very important thing we say for non-linearity is that we cultivate. We do not necessarily fall in either incubation or acceleration. Again, we don't like binaries. So we decided that cultivation is the right philosophy, is the right approach, is the right methodology.
What do you mean by cultivation?
By cultivation, we mean, first of all, culture. It's a culture, it's a mindset of purpose, discipline, business. We mean cycles. So because we don't like that linear paths, because life is not linear. So we believe in that the way that we can serve entrepreneurs is through a series of discrete, relevant cycles of support, of business accompaniment support.
We're talking very conceptually. Can you help me out here by talking about a particular enterprise that you have supported at Altura?
Sure. So we have. So for example, there is this coffee cooperative that we have worked through many cycles, and that they have needed different type of resources at different moments in time. And so as they advance, they are able to have specific asks in what we can provide them, if it's something related to finance or to access funding or investment, for example. And so in the last 4 years, we have helped them to develop specific aspects of their business model. Again,
you're talking very conceptually. Talk to me coffee. Talk to me about the coffee cup and the coffee I drink and people who are harvesting the coffee beans.
Sure. So this coffee cooperative is called FESEG. They work with 2,000 farmers.
And they're in the highlands?
They're in the highlands.
In Guatemala?
They work with, like around 2,000 farmers that are being paid fair trade. They actually have a line of coffee that is women grown. That's how they sell. And they also work with very, very high level environmental standards. So they have something called like biofactories. So they help these farmers have their own, to create their own organic fertilizer, for example. So it's a full circle. And so that is a case where they have gone through a range of cultivation cycles where basically we provide them business support.
And how do you work with the fact that you want to not impose your own Western perspective, but you're trying to work with the way that they work, with their indigenous methodologies and their indigenous vision?
Sure. I mean, it's not easy. It's a matter of respect. It's a matter of understanding. It's a matter of being aware of exactly what you're mentioning. And so I think that with that on the table, the relationship goes better. And again, it's not easy. And that is why with these kind of cycles and more discrete type of support, we can get that intimacy that is required for this type of support.
And I'm also interested in your own journey, because you were born and raised in Mexico City at a time of tremendous change. During the 80s, you had a World Cup win, but you also had an enormous earthquake, one of the largest earthquakes in history, a time of really deep environmental, ecological, and indeed social change. Did that help create the entrepreneur in you?
I think that made me aware of how fragile environment is, a city can be, and kind of made me be aware of all these things that basically that was the seed that started growing in me in the mid-80s.
So it was the fragility which meant...
The fragility of us as human beings, you know, an earthquake can change everything in seconds. I was lucky enough that nothing happened to my family, but I knew people that their house and part of their lives were destroyed because of the earthquake in a few blocks away. And so, yeah, I mean, being, you know, just like of caring and of having a view of also supporting in a like also preventing, right? So I think all those concepts started growing in me at that moment.
And we've just got a question as well from Aluke Cool, and he wants to know, or she wants to know, how do you reconcile cultivation with short-term requirements of funders? Thank you so very much, by the way, for that question. A great question.
Yeah, thanks, Aluke. So one of our cultivation cycles can be in very advanced stages. So entrepreneurs can come into our cultivation path requiring investment preparedness, for example, or to be linked to funding. We actually, last year, we launched our own impact investment fund, exactly to eliminate intermediaries and be closer to what entrepreneurs need.
And where do you get the funding from?
So that came from a range of actors. From the IDB Lab is one of them. That is the Inter-American Development Bank, who has a funding arm, and other European foundations. And so, yeah, that's where it came
And where
from.
next for you, just very briefly?
We're trying to connect, to bring more different type of resources aside of finance. So we are working very hard on providing better connections for talent.
Okay.
And for markets. So we are actually piloting parts of our platform to connect better entrepreneurs with international markets.
That's really, really fascinating. Thank you so very much, Daniel. Daniel Buchbinder, thank you so much for joining us, and to our audience on Facebook Live. Thank you.